Today on Grubstakers, we're going to be talking about Bill Ackman, the charismatic star of the Netflix documentary Betting on Zero. We're going to be talking about his humble beginnings, his feud and tempestuous relationship with Carl Icahn, as well as how he's a crusader for people who have been screwed by Herbalife, and simultaneously the Martin Scarelli of people not named Martin Scarelli. So settle in and buckle up, because it's time for some Grubstakers.
Because of my success in the private sector, I had the chance to run America's largest city for 12 years.
I taught those kids lessons on product development and marketing, and they taught me what it was like growing up feeling targeted for your race.
And that's just not true.
You know, I love having the support of real billionaires.
Hey everybody, welcome to Grubstakers. We're back at it right here. Sean P. McCarthy, joined as always by my friends
Steve Jeffrey,
Andy Palmer,
Yogi Polywall.
And today we're going to be talking about Bill Ackman, a hedge fund billionaire and star of the Netflix documentary Betting on Zero, which is the fascinating story of his bet against Herbalife. And we're going to kind of go over that and just other things that are not quite talked about in the documentary. And, hopefully we can do that all before the Trump blows up the world. I was thinking about this the other day because we talked about this in the group chat, is that, it would take us 19 years. There's about 2,000 billionaires in the world. And the goal in this podcast, I think, is I would like to cover, just provide a resource to learn about all of the billionaires in the world. Right. It would take us about 19 years. And I'm realizing we might have to truncate it a bit. We might have to compress multiple people into one episode or do 20 minutes each in the interest of getting this all done before New York City is a, what do you call it, a parking lot?
Sure, a teenage wasteland, if you will.
Yeah, we hope we will be doing a special.
The term is Bob O'Reilly.
Wait, we're continuing the pod if we get attacked, right?
Yeah, I think so. With the sound quality might go down. You might hear like screams and cries in the background and kind of a tinny sound.
We have EMP-proofed our equipment.
You just need to own a can and string, and you can get on our network.
If I started my workday and then there's a nuclear explosion, assuming I survive, my first question would be, so I guess the pod's off this week?
We're like, no, Steven, you got to get out of the fallout shelter. We promise them new episodes every Sunday. This is how you lose audience when you don't consistently put out episodes after a nuclear attack.
It's quantity. It's consistency.
Sean and I do in our de facto fallout shelter, which is our basement. We do have podcasting equipment down there.
Hell yeah.
So it's just Andy and I this week. It looks like Steven and Yogi were melted in the event. But we're going to talk about Carl Icahn. All his net worth is now non-existent because the banking system has collapsed. But he was technically a billionaire, and we did the research.
You may know Carl Icahn as one of the haunting shadows in downtown Manhattan of people who have been incinerated.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that black splotch on a wall, but that used to be Carl Icahn on the side of the Chase building.
Before all the bombs, we had about 8 printers printing all of Wikipedia, so we really made sure to cover our bases on the research.
But yeah, so next weekend, I think the plan is we're going to do a special episode on the weapons industry, and we'll talk a bit more about, Trump's bombing of Syria and that whole situation there. But today, we're talking about Bill Ackman. And Bill Ackman, again, the documentary on Netflix, I really recommend. It's very good, pretty depressing. It's called Betting on Zero. And they talk a bit about Herbalife's business practices and this big short sell bet that Bill Ackman made against them. He ultimately lost a lot of money.
I don't know why Sean thought it was depressing. I found it very uplifting.
The Herbalife, how they're helping the Latino community start small businesses that go under in a year.
I do want to say that we started this podcast with the question, is there a good billionaire?
Yeah.
And I watched the documentary and I was like, yeah, it's Bill Ackman.
He's answered that question.
He is a hero, and I think we can wrap this up for good.
It's nice. Like, if you watch the documentary and know nothing else about Bill Ackman, he comes away pretty well.
He does,
You know?
yep.
And the documentary, or the episode today, I think we'll talk about some of the other things that Bill Ackman does. But I guess just to bring people up,
What?
yeah, believe it or not, a guy worth more than $1 billion, more things have happened to him than just the 2-year span of his life chronicled in a Netflix documentary.
No, he's saving the Latino community.
I mean, not everyone's cut out for business, Sean, okay? The Latino community is not being swindled by these billionaires, okay? They just need to work harder, all right?
Yeah. They
Pick themselves up by their chomp club.
So I guess we should start from the beginning here. So if you haven't seen the documentary, basically it goes through Herbalife's business practices. And Herbalife is a pyramid scheme. I mean, allegedly or whatever.
It's a multi-level marketing company.
Right. Which, for some reason, there's like a distinction between like the good kind of multi-level marketing. Well, the idea with the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, their way of setting this out is that if they make more of their money by recruiting other people into it than they do by actually selling their products, then that's when it passes from a multi-level marketing scheme into a pyramid scheme.
Right.
There's a very thin line between the two, and it's pretty clear that there are multiple huge pyramid schemes, particularly Herbalife and Amway, operating completely unhindered today. Allegedly,
It's sort of like
send those cease and desist notices to Yogi Poliwal.
it's like if you bought a McDonald's franchise.
Uh-huh.
And the only way you could make money off of your McDonald's franchise was selling 3 of your friends' McDonald's franchises. And the only way they could make money is by selling 3 of their friends' McDonald's franchises.
And you only make burgers for other McDonald's franchisees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To convince them to open McDonald's franchises.
There's a
Right.
product to sell to other
Right,
people.
right.
Okay, but yeah, so just to like, and kind of what they go through in this documentary is, among other things, Herbalife has had a lot of sales pitches where they tell people, oh, you can become a millionaire or you can make any amount of money. And then they go through very clearly in the documentary, like how this is a pyramid scheme, where they say like 1% of Herbalife members get 88% of all the money.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching it and I'm being like, oh, that's the U.S. economy. Like, so that's the pyramid scheme, is they just mirror the actual U.S. economy. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting where it's like the way it actually works is like you get money from sales made by your downstreams. And Amway kind of works the same way, where Herbalife has, these nutritional products, the protein bars.
Allegedly nutritional products.
The protein bars, the powder shakes, and all these things. And essentially, they just sell them for like 3 times the cost that you get like a Slim Fast or whatever other market alternative. But you can't buy these in stores anywhere. You can only buy these from actual Herbalife vendors,
Right.
And so
They're actually prohibited from selling to like retail stores and
Right.
shopping malls.
Right. So these vendors, they can sell these products that are like not that good and 3 times the price of comparables. But the real way they make money is recruiting other people to sell their products, because everybody they recruit, they get a cut of their sales, and it just goes higher and higher up the pyramid, and it's a pyramid scheme.
I will say the ballsiest pyramid scheme is probably Cutco, because they're selling their pyramid scheme is selling knives.
Right.
Yeah, most people in Cutco aren't making a lot of money or losing money, and now they have
Right.
lots of knives.
Yeah, and they just found out that they got screwed.
Yep.
And have a lot of very sharp knives.
With Herbalife, I don't think they didn't have much bad to say about the actual product.
I mean,
They said it was like overpriced Slim Fast, basically.
yeah,
They said
well,
it costs a little too much.
At
It costs
one
3
point-
times as much.
at one point,
on
Bill in
average.
the doc says like have you tried? One of the interviewers, I think it's CNBC, says like, have you tried their products? Like, no. I've heard some shady stuff about how they make their stuff. I mean, like the reality is that you can put a powder in a box and say it's healthy, and just off the placebo effect, it could work. And nobody's using these products, so it doesn't need to work as well.
They're just selling it to each other.
Yeah.
Within the Herbalife company, sort of.
It's like kind of like selling off like a jerk-off glove. Like, no one's gonna use it, but
Right.
you can pretend like it's got its own lube, and trust me, it's good for your butt too.
Hey, don't badmouth jerk off gloves
What?
on our podcast.
Have you guys been a part of a pyramid scheme ever? Any of y'all?
When I first moved to New York, some dude tried to. I didn't have a job, and I was looking on Craigslist, and some guy's like, "Yeah, hey, meet me at a coffee shop. I got a job." And then he tries to recruit me to Amway, and at the time I didn't really know about it, so I was like, "All right, well, I'm gonna do some research." And he's like, "Well, you shouldn't just Google us." And he actually said to me, I remember this. He said, if you Google Oprah, you'll read bad things about Oprah.
That's so funny.
Oh, is Oprah engaged in a multi-level marketing scheme?
When Bill Ackman noticed that Herbalife was in fact a multi-level marketing pyramid scheme, and that forms the basis of his idea to short the company.
Yeah, well, and so we mentioned the storefronts, and the recruiting the Latino community. Just like another interesting thing in that documentary is they talk about how Herbalife sales, a lot of it focused on Spanish-speaking people and undocumented people, because interestingly enough, when those people get scammed, they're not as likely to go to the authorities.
Right.
And of course, all this belief in American dream and hard work, and they, everybody responds to this sales pitch that if you just work super hard, you can make money when you're all the way starting at the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah, in the doc they also talk about how when you get fucked over, you feel so terrible you don't want to tell anyone until you find out that other people got fucked over. Then I want to admit that I got fucked.
Well, it's really embarrassing to realize that you're just not hustling hard enough.
You just didn't rise and grind enough.
Gotta grind. You gotta grind.
You did the rising, but not every day you did the grinding. But my favorite shit they do in that documentary, and you see this all the time with just how amorphous woke politics are, is at various points Herbalife spokespeople are accused of predatory practices against the Latino community, and they get really defensive, and they say well, it's just racist to imply that our Latino customers do not know what they are doing. I just think it's so condescending that these people think that we are preying on undocumented non-English speakers because they're saying that they're less intelligent or whatever.
Yeah, at one point one of them was like, a grocery store opens in a poor community and people applaud it. And we're doing the same things by providing nutrition to poor people.
We're charging 3 times more. And
I don't see the problem.
Oh, God. But, yeah, I mean, Herbalife is a terrible company. But Bill Ackman, who's really the subject of this episode, he makes a bet, a short sell bet. Where
So let's describe a short sell real quick.
Yeah. So
if I had to break it down in so few words, it's selling high and buying low. So you're borrowing stocks from someone at a premium or something that you don't own, and then you sell them high.
I'll loan you my stocks. You'll pay me some interest for them.
Yeah, you're taking out a loan basically.
You sell the stock with the idea that it'll go down, and then when you buy it back, you'll spend less money on it, and so you'll be able to take a cut of the amount you sold it for.
Right. So at the end of that whole process, the broker who helped lend you the stock gets it back, and just for the premium.
Right.
Yeah.
But and then the problem with that is you can lose a lot of money if the stock goes up because you've borrowed it and you're liable for the difference if the stock price goes up.
Instead of with a long...
What'd you do with it, Sean?
Shut up. You borrow.
You dug a deep hole with it?
Did you guys have some maple syrup?
No more making fun of how I pronounce words on the podcast. Fucking Putin, drop the H-bomb now.
Don't say that too loud. We're literally recording this.
Yeah, so it's inherently risky because you could lose an infinite number because the stock price could go up to whatever.
Right.
And it can only fall to zero.
Mm-hmm. Because eventually you have to buy it back, and so you have to have the amount of money to pay for that stock.
Right.
Yep. And the more the stock price goes up above whatever price you struck it at with the broker, the increasingly more you have to pay due to how highly leveraged you are.
And I learned this from shorting penny stocks.
It's going to go to a fraction of a penny.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it turns out that putting $20,000 into shorting penny stocks makes you liable for $5 million.
All right, so
Andy used to go by Gustavo. All right, well, so yeah, so the point of this documentary is, I think in 2014 or 2015, Bill Ackman makes this big short sell bet against Herbalife. He has a series of presentations about, how Herbalife is a pyramid scheme, and he tries to get regulators involved. And at the end, which I think we'll go through the timeline later, but he ends up losing about $1 billion on this bet.
Right.
And it's partly
Owned.
and there's a variety of factors for it, but one of which is that Carl Icahn is another billionaire who we'll talk about on a future episode.
The Killmonger of the documentary.
Right. Him and
The real hero.
him and Bill Ackman had a dispute 10 years before the events, and then he sees that Bill Ackman is in a big short sell position, and he realizes, I can just spend billions of dollars buying this stock and make him lose money, because as we discussed, that's what happens when stock price goes up when you're short selling.
Bill Ackman describes, or how
Carl Icahn.
Carl Icahn describes Bill Ackman.
And I'm telling you, he's like the crybaby in the schoolyard. I went to a tough school in Queens that they used to beat up the little Jewish boys, and he was like one of these little Jewish boys.
There's a great CNBC phone interview with both of them where they yell at each other for 30 minutes, and this is in the middle of the Herbalife thing, and they play.
You said to me you'd like to be friends so that we could invest together.
Carl, I have no interest. Do you think I want to invest with you? Okay, let's
I
move
would
on.
invest with you.
Let's
you were
move
the
on.
last man on earth.
So they're BFFs.
Yeah.
They should do a series called Investment Activists Getting Coffee.
But yeah, it maybe when the nuke comes, they will be the last men on Earth, and they can invest together.
I would watch a series with both of them.
They get a fire starting company, a rock structure company.
You're going to insult me, and I'm going to insult you, and we're going to make money on the stock market.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then we're going to fuck because we have needs. There's no one else here.
But so I guess
when I said beat up Jewish boys, I meant beat off Jewish boys. They would whine. All right, move on, Chuck.
Yeah. And so we'll get.
Apparently, Eichmann was Jewish, and that makes his comment okay.
Yeah, it's not anti-Semitic. It's just anti-himself.
It's self-hating anti-Semitism.
No, you don't understand, Andy. He didn't like the crying Jewish boys.
Right.
Not all the Jewish boys, just the crying ones.
You can say any group sucks if you just add certain adjectives before it, like
the crying Mexicans.
Yes,
that's
precisely.
what Herbalife said.
Yes.
We don't like the crying Latinos.
Man, I hate to go back to it, but in that doc, there is that one scene where one of the Mexican store owners who's left, shows you the dude who fucked him over, and that guy, comes out, he's like, oh, hey, and then realizes, oh, there's a camera in that car. I should probably go back inside my store. But, this dude, you see him drive off, just motherfucker, I can drive up to your store whenever I want. There's a very, Sopranos feel to how that episode, that part of the documentary plays out.
Well, so Bill Ackman, and we mentioned in the documentary, and he's worth, as of today, April 2018, Forbes has him at $1.08 billion. In 2015, yeah, in 2015 he was $2 billion.
Can we short bet against Bill Ackman's net worth?
Just his personal net worth, yes.
Make bets on it. All right.
Yeah, no, I mean, he seems to not be doing so great, which we'll get into. But a funny thing, so as we mentioned, he's kind of comes off as the hero in the documentary, but just a few funny scene. One funny scene I liked at the end, he visits this Latino church of people who have been harmed by Herbalife, and because he's the person making this crusade against Herbalife, it's a come together moment, and he talks about the testimonials and how emotional it is. And I remember there's a man there who tells him that he lost $20,000 in Herbalife, and Bill Ackman's so sympathetic, and I'm like, this guy could just give him $20,000.
Right.
Right now, it would be if somebody was telling me I lost my net worth of $1. I could just reach into my wallet and be okay, you'll be all right.
Right.
But Bill Ackman, and all billionaires really are just so divorced from the world that they're not I could just write a check for $20,000. It's how much I spend in a fucking restaurant on a weekend.
Yeah, that's the thing about crazy about this is, to be a good billionaire, you just have to help yourself.
Yeah.
In reality of it, it's a bad billionaire fucks everyone and benefits. A good billionaire is I'm kind of helping everyone, but mostly myself. Yeah. Literally every person Ackman talks to in this, he could give, a couple of grand, and they would be much better off. And honestly, He could have not made this documentary and just given them money and never talked about any of this. I would appreciate it.
That's not his style, though. They talked about him like he's a master manipulator of the media,
Right.
which is a great phrase.
Right. Well,
And he does have a talent for it.
he's a moderately charismatic guy, and journalists like him because he's got like the Anderson Cooper look and all that, and he seems like he knows what he's talking about.
There's this Business Insider article talking about like top 5 tips about, not tips. Let me take that entire thing again. There's this Business Insider article about the top things you don't know about him, and one of them says, him quoting himself, "I'm a good conversationalist," Ackman once said. How do you get such a good conversationalist? It comes from a lot of blind dating. That's his... Yeah, I've been trying to slang my dick around New York for a while, and you know what? It makes you good about talking about yourself.
Okay, Cupid.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
There's a picture from Machu Picchu.
How'd you become such a good conversationalist? Oh, I've got herpes like 4 times.
You see, being a billionaire in New York, you got to learn how to slang that dick, you know? I mean, even though I'm in a relationship for 25 years, more importantly, though, the women I blind dated before that's what made me such a good conversationalist.
I'm a great conversationalist because I'm cheating on my wife.
You meet so many interesting women when you cheat on your wife. You learn people you'd never learn about. But so I guess let's get into the biography just to kind of go through the timeline of Bill Ackman's life. He's born 1966 in Chappaqua, New York, and this guy had a very privileged upbringing. His grandfather founded a real estate financing firm that's today it's still operational, known as Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group LLC. His grandfather His grandfather founded this real estate.
Only our podcast in the 90s.
His grandfather founded this in 1926. So this is a long history, and then his father took over and was president of this before his father leaves in 2011 to go work at Bill Ackman's company, his son's company. Mm-hmm. And so he is. So his father has an MBA from Harvard. Bill Ackman also has an MBA from Harvard.
That's right.
He gets a magna cum laude BA in history from Harvard in 1988. Bill Ackman does. And would you like to know the name of his thesis?
Yeah.
Scaling the Ivy Wall: The Jewish and Asian American Experience in Harvard Admissions. And
I went to a tough school in Queens. We used to beat up the little Jewish boys.
Say the thesis again. Say the title of that bullshit.
Scaling the Ivy Wall: The Jewish and Asian American Experience in Harvard Admissions.
That is disgusting. That is one of the worst things I've ever read, and I've never even read that. That's terrible. Scaling the Ivy Wall. I like that. Man, that's so funny. I mean, personally, as an Indian person, I hate this because Asia is literally a good quarter of the world, and the Jewish population is less than the population in New York. And it's like, I think it's very frustrating that those two groups are being tied in this article, as if somehow the experience of Jewish people and Asian people are similar in that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just kind of funny to me because, like, I haven't read his thesis statement because why would I do that to myself? But, but just the title itself, like Scaling the Ivy Wall, it's like your father has an MBA from Harvard. Oh, I'm sure it was so hard for you to get into Harvard.
Right.
Father, they are making me write a statement of purpose, Father.
So there was actually...
Father, you told me there would be no wall to scale.
This is good content for my thesis. I must go to the study. Matilda!
There was a Forward.com article where both Bill Ackman and his father sat down together for like a talk in New York, I think in 2015. And so Ackman Ziff Real Estate, it's a privately held company. It still exists. We don't know like how much business they did and these kinds of things, but we do know that when Ackman went to start his first hedge fund, Gotham Partners, he was able to just get $3 million to start a hedge fund, which again...
It's a common theme.
Yes, common theme.
Through family and friends.
Yeah, through family friends.
Small donations.
It should become a meme on this show. But
it reflected his early dream to become the Penguin.
But so they do this father-son talk together, and he talked a bit about Ackman Ziff real estate, and his father said it really got prosperous after the Korean War. Again, it was founded in 1926, but I'm just quoting from forward here. His father says it really got prosperous after the Korean War with demand for apartments in Manhattan. He describes all the different parcels sold to developers, deal after deal after deal.
Does he say why the Korean War?
I guess all the returning troops or the economic boom.
You see, Andy, when you have to cross this ivy wall and you're Jewish or Asian, you really learn to appreciate the dichotomy between the two. Matilda, by the way, isn't her real name. It's Lupe. but the family calls her Matilda.
It turns out all the the shell-shocked GIs who constantly had flashback of the 500 Chinese people, each one killed, were very easy to screw over with upscale rent.
Yeah, they became prosperous after the Korean War because they took a deal with the CIA to help throw a guy out of one of their apartment windows to cover up biological warfare.
That's where that In-Q-Tel became their largest shareholder.
Wait a second, isn't also that the era when like redlining became a big thing?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, but
we digress.
Yes, we do digress. The point is, the company was started in 26. It had some trouble in the Great Depression, but it came out of the Great Depression in 39, and then by the end of the Korean War in 53, it was extremely profitable and doing well. So Bill Ackman was born in 66. He was born into a lot of privilege. And the one other great quote from this joint father-son talk is Bill Ackman talking about his career path. So he graduates from Harvard in 1988, and he recalls in this forward article, he says, quote, "I couldn't get a job when I graduated from Harvard, so I went to work for my dad. I worked for you for 2 years. Then went to business school, and you wanted me to come back, and I came back for 1 week, then chose to go out on my own." So basically, you know, his struggle was he couldn't find a job after he graduated from Harvard,
Right.
so he went to work for his father's multi-million-dollar real estate financing firm, and then he had $3 million to go found his own hedge fund.
Papa, I enjoy the buildings too. The job market, it's so hard when you're a white Jewish man. Just like it is for the Asians. I wrote about it in my thesis.
So Bill
Full disclosure, after college, I also went to work for my dad, and it was part-time and minimum wage. I told actually a mutual friend of ours who might listen, Nam, that, and he just laughed in my face and was like, "Man, there is no nepotism there."
Maybe your father just doesn't love you enough, Andy. Your father never taught you how to scale the ivy wall.
I once got a raise when minimum wage got increased.
I'm just imagining Andy's...
Your dad will only pay you what's legally required.
Right. Yeah. I'm imagining Andy's father like bitching about having to pay him more. I guess I got to give my useless son $10 an hour now.
You try to start a union.
Politicians.
It was $9.
Andy just comes in and there's like a Milton Friedman article on his dad about how the minimum wage is like price controls and price controls never work.
I did tell my dad, I'm like, "I'm getting a raise." He's like, "Yeah, that's just because the state legislature wanted you to get one."
All right, so Bill Ackman gets an MBA from Harvard in 1992, and the same year he graduates, he starts Gotham Partners, his first hedge fund, in 1992 with Harvard classmate David Berkowitz. As we've mentioned...
Thank you for the job, Dad, by the way.
As we've mentioned, according to Routers and some other people, they had about $3 million in startup capital, friends and family, and they did mediocre.
Friends and Family is a trust fund, by the
way. If we have time at the end, we'll talk a little bit just about the hedge fund business in general. But just to give you the long and short, like the model.
Good one.
So the hedge fund model is usually called the 2 and 20 model. And the idea is that, though they've had to decrease their fees recently, but the idea is that a hedge fund, you put your money there, and they charge you 2% a year of all assets that you put with them, and then they charge you 20% of all profits they make for you. And if you compare that to, say, an equities traded fund or exchange traded fund with the S&P 500, for example, then the management fee is 0.1% a year, and they don't charge you a cut of the profits.
It can be higher, but yeah,
Yes.
it's overall much cheaper
Yes.
than your average hedge fund.
Right, and we were talking earlier about how hedge funds are kind of like a value transfer scheme between the bourgeoisie, where it's like he's able to raise $3 million because he knows a lot of rich people and they can invest in there. And I think my opinion is successful hedge funds are basically entirely based around insider trading. Maybe a controversial opinion, but this is from what I've read of it. But so Gotham Partners starts in 92, and they have some kind of mediocre returns. Like they lose money some years, and this is the 90s boom, by the way. Some years they make 14% gain, but again, the stock market, S&P 500, will be doing close to that without, any fees or without significant fees. But what does Gotham Partners in is they buy a golf course, a golf company that's losing money.
Mm-hmm.
In 1997, they buy a golf course operator and rename it to Gotham Golf. And then this is from Business Insider.
They were taken down by the Batman.
From Business Insider, as time passed, the value of its assets declined, but Ackman and his partner kept buying up more golf courses. The company got bigger and deeper into debt. And then
you won't get away with buying all these golf courses.
So basically,
You were raised at a golf course. I was born there.
your punishment must be more severe. You will watch the Masters.
Even when Tiger's not participating.
I like how you can all riff on this, but not Palantir.
Yeah. Okay, so
we have to read the Cimarron. Who wants to?
No one joined me. All right, whatever.
You can't do a Bane riff on Palantir. That doesn't make any sense.
So as according to the New York Times, Gotham Golf eventually accounted for 20% of the firm's assets, the fund's assets. It sank deeper into trouble. From 2000 to 2002, according to the New York Times, Gotham Partners hedge fund lent Gotham Golf $15.4 million. So they keep lending money to this money-losing golf operation. They keep buying up more golf courses. And then finally, Bill Ackman comes up with the idea to merge. So they also owned this company, the First Union Real Estate Equity and Mortgage, according to Business Insider. And Bill Ackman comes up with the idea to merge his golf company with this cash-rich equity and mortgage company. But the shareholders of the equity mortgage company sue to stop the merger from going through. A judge blocks it temporarily, and then Gotham Partners runs out of money, essentially.
So you're saying Gotham Partners is in the hole in one.
So Bill Ackman has to wind down the hedge fund in 2002, but not before engaging in a potential pump and dump scheme. Gotham Partners, because they're losing all this money on this golf company, they don't have any liquid assets, so they start having to sell things. So a weird thing happens where Gotham, throughout I think late 2002, keeps issuing glowing reports about this company prepaid, and having buy recommendations on their site, and saying all these, and publishing press articles promoting prepaid. But then in December 11, 2002, although, again, this is quoting from the New York Times, although the Gotham website still carried a recommendation for prepaid and an estimated per-share value of 67, Gotham Partners began selling, shedding 10% of its position at around $30 a share. And then they eventually sell the rest of it at the end of December. And then on December 23rd, the research and the buy recommendation disappears from their website.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The lower the score, the better you're doing.
But basically, the idea is, what happened here is you can either say they're doing a pump and dump, where they're putting out all this information with buy recommendations and, talking about how great this company is while they're selling it.
Right.
But they would argue, and they have argued, that oh, we were in a tough position and we needed liquid assets, so we were only selling it because we had nothing else to sell. And Elliot Spitzer, the Attorney General of New York at the time, looked into this. He ultimately didn't charge them criminally, but it was kind of a black mark, and it was,
Why's it gotta be black?
it's kind of a Jewish mark. What?
You think at the board meeting...
Cut that.
You're editing, Sean.
You think at the board meeting, they're like, well, returns have not been on par. And then they all have a good laugh.
No, but we are losing money.
As someone who read 4 articles on this, I will say Reuters has the headline, Judge Calls For. So Andy Palmer's humor would make him a great newspaper man.
I've been saying that for a long time.
Print is dead.
Well, they use golf rules for the EPS estimate. The lower the better.
But so, yeah, Gotham Partners goes under. And then, as we mentioned, Carl Icahn, this is where the feud develops. So basically, as he's going down, in 2003, Ackman enters in this deal with Carl Icahn. And then Ackman...
It's a real Haldeman-Ehrlichman duo.
But Ackman says... So basically, Carl Icahn won't pay him. Like, they enter into this deal that if preconditions are met, Icon's supposed to sell. It's like they called it schmuck insurance, basically. If Icahn were to sell shares within 3 years and make a profit of 10% or more, him and Ackman would split the proceeds. Icahn does, but then he just refuses to give Ackman money, which is kind of funny. Alpha move. And then, of course...
I went to a tough school in Queens. They used to beat up the little Jewish boys.
But so Ackman sues, and eventually, 8 years later, Icahn is forced to pay Ackman $4.5 million plus 9% interest per year since the date of the sale. So Ackman sues him and eventually gets his money, but this is this causes a big feud between them, and eventually it will cause Icahn to just fuck him over on the Herbalife deal.
Petty.
Oh, yeah. And
so petty.
It's the greatest thing because, again, today, Carl Icahn's worth something like $17+ billion. And again, this is $4.5 million that he owed to him.
Right.
And this is just
most people, that's like $2 or something.
Right, exactly. And he's just like, no, fuck you.
Yeah.
I'm running up my high score. But yeah, no, just kind of a fun...
Always be hustling.
The best thing is, so this hedge fund collapses and winds down in 2003, and then, of course, because there's no consequences to being a failure if you're, born on, third base,
right.
He's immediately, in 2004, able to start another hedge fund.
Fingering.
Pershing Square Capital Management. He starts in...
I guess that's oral.
He starts Pershing Square Capital Management
It's a little bit of both if you do it right.
A year after the failure, he starts Pershing Square Capital Management in 2004, which is quoting from Wikipedia, with $54 million in funding from his personal funds and former business partner, Lacadia National. He starts Pershing Square Capital Management in 2004, and just to skip ahead, Pershing Square is Capital Management is not doing so well today. The hedge fund, I'm just quoting from Forbes here, the $8.8 billion hedge fund has underperformed the S&P 500 by 20% for 3 years straight.
Nice.
And the year before that starts 2014, they post a respectable 40% gain, which would ultimately lead to an insider trading case that they have to settle in a California lawsuit, which we'll talk about briefly. But basically, they do mediocre. Well, they actually do pretty good in most terms, but eventually they make some horrible deals. And I want to talk a bit about the insider trading case because that leads into the other thing they did, which is kind of a Martin Shkreli move. So in 2014, Pershing enters into a secret deal with Valeant Pharmaceuticals, which we'll talk about more. But so Valeant Pharmaceuticals wants to buy this company, Allergan, which was the makers of Botox. And so the idea is that Valeant doesn't have the capital by themselves.
Steven, we can hear your breathing.
Yes, Steven.
Sorry, I was just like,
'Cause I'm just incensed by this.
I understand. I just wanted to point that out.
But so okay, the timeline of this is in February 2014, Pershing and Valeant Pharmaceuticals enter in this deal where Pershing's going to buy 9% of Allergan, and then Valeant is going to announce a hostile takeover and take over the company. In February 2014, Pershing does buy the 9% stake for $3 billion. In April, Valeant announces their hostile takeover and $45 billion bid. And, of course, this shoots the stock price up. Eventually, Allergan is sold instead to a Dublin company for $66 billion. And Pershing Capital is able to cash out after this stock price has been pushed all the way up. But essentially, this is alleged to be insider trading, and eventually they settled the insider trading case because Pershing Capital knew that the pharmaceutical company Valeant was going to make a hostile takeover bid in April and bid up the stock price. And so using that non-public information, they bought a large stake in February. And eventually they were sued by shareholders, and they settled for $270 million, I believe. And so basically that's just kind of like a classic case of insider trading. And I think this kind of thing's pretty endemic in Wall Street and hedge funds in general.
That was in the year that they returned 40%.
Right. Yes.
So I mean, that's as if you just say that's a cost of doing business, it's still a pretty good year.
Mm-hmm. But yes, so essentially that was the last year of good returns they had, was the year that they did this kind of insider trading scheme. But so what happens after this is after Bill Ackman enters in this deal with Valeant Pharmaceuticals, he wants to invest in Valeant Pharmaceuticals itself. So in March 2015, about a year after,
expand to Prince Valiant Pharmaceuticals.
In March 2015, Pershing Capital...
He uses comics to guide his investments.
So in March 2015, Bill Ackman enters into the worst deal of his career. He begins buying Valeant Pharmaceuticals, eventually acquires almost a 10% stake for about $3.2 billion.
And as well as Beetle Bailey Construction.
2 years later, he would take a $4 billion loss on this. Basically, Valeant peaks at 200. He buys it at $190 a share. It peaks at $260 a share, and he sells it for $11 a share in April 2018. As of today, it's around $17. And so the reason is Valeant is kind of a Martin Shkreli company. If I can just find this New York Times quote here.
In interviews, he said he regretted not investing in Get Fuzzy weapons manufacturers or Foxtrot Consulting Solutions.
So,
he did take a short...
Jughead Logistics?
Yeah.
All right. So basically, Valeant's business practice...
Jughead Logistics?
Valeant's business practice, which...
That's great.
Valeant's business practice, which he fully knew about going into this, is basically buying up existing drugs and existing drug companies and pharmaceuticals, laying off all their employees to achieve savings, and then jacking up the prices of drugs that they own.
That's classic corporate raider behavior. Yeah.
Right.
Just fire everyone and jack up prices.
Didn't they cut out all research as well?
Yes. It's kind of fun. So I'm quoting from October 4, 2015 New York Times article. Valeant is known for buying companies and laying off their employees to achieve savings. It's accumulated a debt of about $30 billion. It spends an amount equivalent to only 3% of its sales on research and development, which it views as risky and inefficient, compared with buying existing drugs. Traditional big drug companies spend 15 to 20% of sales on research and development. Valeant also pays extremely low taxes because it is officially based in Canada, although its CEO, Michael Pearson, operates from New Jersey. And Mr. Pearson, I believe, was one of the highest paid. He was the highest paid CEO in Canada. He was making something like $100-some billion a year.
What?
Sorry, $100-some mil.
That makes more sense, Sean.
Yeah, I know. Jesus.
But what if he was making $100-some bill, but he had like a crippling jet ski addiction?
Jet skis, eh?
Yeah. He would just, buy them by the thousands and then try to ride every single one over the course of a week.
Rig them all up together?
Yeah.
Incidentally, Bill
Right.
Ackman's had a divorce as well. I don't know, Sean, you want to talk about what you're talking about? You want to do some more reading?
Wait,
Well-
first I want to note something that's kind of great is that Bill, the story of Valeant Pharmaceuticals, we talked about Bill Ackman having a whole documentary about him short selling Herbalife.
Right.
The Valeant Pharmaceuticals story is actually chronicled in a different Netflix documentary about a trader who was short selling Valeant Pharmaceuticals, which makes Bill Ackman the only person that I know of to have a Netflix documentary both on him taking a short position and being shorted on.
That's why he's the next Buffett. He's just making moves, shaking things.
But so basically, well, just a little bit more on Valeant before we move on. But basically, the Valeant business model, again, this is
Also, unlike his Herbalife position, the Valeant one is actually in Dirty Money spoiler a success story for the shorter.
The Valeant company, so its business model is the Martin Shkreli model, which again is a lot of different companies. Shkreli is just the fall guy for this business model. But just two cases, 2 heart medications. The United States House Committee looked into this. 2 heart medications it had just bought the rights to sell, Nitropress and Isoprel. Valeant had raised the prices of Nitropress by 212% and Isoprel by 525%.
I thought Nitropress was that energy drink. I thought that...
People need that to
yeah,
live.
come on.
It acquired Salix Pharmaceuticals in 2015. It raised the price of the diabetes pill Glumataz about 800% in 1 year. Again, this is all totally fine. Like, Wall Street loves this.
Right.
What actually did Valeant in and crash the stock price, the Senate looking into and the House looking into it didn't help. But what really did it was massive accounting fraud. And
oh, really?
yeah. So what happens is in October 2015, a short seller activist looks into this. Citro Research, run by Andrew Left, who's he publishes a short seller newsletter warning about companies he believes are fraudulent. So he looks into this company, and in October 2015, he finds out that Valeant has been secretly buying up different pharmacies, not disclosing them, and then apparently billing different pharmacies that it owns, sending billings between them, just essentially engaging in accounting fraud to buff up its numbers. Like it owns Philidor. It bought Philidor Pharmacy without disclosing it. And then finally, after this report comes out, the CEO at the time, Michael Pearson, reveals that he had bought it. And you know, so they're buying all these pharmacies and not disclosing them and sending invoices between the different companies. And what actually what finally brought this to light, as my understanding is, they also, it's kind of funny. So they bought Philidor Pharmacy. They bought another pharmacy based in California called R&O Pharmacy. Mm-hmm. And then R&O files a court action suing Valeant because they receive an invoice from them for $69 million. But the weird thing is...
Nice.
Yeah, so... they receive this invoice from Valeant...
Just a note, Steven looked at me like, you going to take this one?
He gave the room a look like, I see a ball. Is anyone going to kick it?
They received this invoice for $69 million from Valeant, but it should have been sent from Philidor, which Valeant owns. But because R&O had no idea, they sued for like possible fraud, and then this whole thing gets exposed.
For $420 million?
Yes, but the funny part of the story is Valeant actually owned both Philidor and R&O, the company that was suing it.
Oh wow!
It was just like essentially they were doing fraud and they fucked up and they sent an invoice on the wrong letterhead. But it's also
fucking friendly fire,
right? So it's the Citro research report is pretty fascinating, but it kind of goes through like all these different companies that they own all have like the same contact phone number, the exact same letterhead. You know,
and here's the office where we do fraud.
Right. Exactly. You know, so it's like just very clear that they're setting up phantom accounts and doing these kinds of things. But the funny thing is that after this report comes out, Bill Ackman doubles down. He actually refers to the CEO. He says the company. Actually, sorry, this is May 2015. He refers to the company as a very early stage Berkshire, referring to Warren Hathaway's company.
Warren Buffett's
Warren
Berkshire
Buffett.
Hathaway.
Yes, Jesus Christ.
man.
But he proclaims its CEO, Michael
We should
Pearson.
get Tom Hathaway on.
Michael Pearson as a Warren Buffett of pharmaceuticals. And basically, he after this report comes out, Bill Ackman doubles down. He defends the company to his shareholders. He says, the investments of this company are worth more than they're being valued at, even though this massive fraud is going on.
So it was,
And you know what-
it was more of a late stage Berkster.
Right.
You know what the shareholders said?
What's that?
You know, I went to a tough school in Queens, and they used to beat up the little Jewish boys.
But basically, Bill Ackman gets hauled before the Senate. He comes onto the board to try and save this company in March 2016. He gets hauled before the Senate, and both him and his defenders engage in this whole, we had no idea what was going on. We only got into the board in 2016 and started looking around. But it's like, going into it, he knew their entire business model was jacking up the price of drugs. And we talked a bit about this on the Sackler episode, the Sackler family episode, with what they did with Purdue Pharma and OxyContin and stuff, where it's like, these are evil, shitty people, but it's more important to ask the question, why do we have a system that rewards people being evil and shitty? And as long as you put the profit motive in medicine, the entire incentive is to jack up the price of drugs. In another case, Valeant bought a pill that was more than 30 years old and jacked the price up 3,000%.
Sean.
So it's like, what value are they creating for the economy by doing this?
Sean, it's like you haven't even heard of innovation.
Greed is good.
Yeah.
But-
It's an efficient outcome.
Yeah.
Like, as long as it's not your income that's going down, that was efficient. If
They
it is
need
your income, there's some market inefficiency there.
They need this system because without monetary rewards, innovation does not exist.
Yeah. But so Valeant, because of this massive accounting fraud, and they get
Accounting innovation.
Ackman gets hauled before,
Thank
and
you, Andy.
Ackman and the CEO gets hauled before the Senate, and they get grilled about the price increases. There's a funny clip with like Carl Levin being
Price innovation.
I think Senator Carl Levin was like, if you just increased the price 30% a year, you still would have got healthy profits instead of this 500% a year. And I do love that the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yeah.
Like, you can still deliver to shareholders by, squeezing heart failure patients by only 30% a year instead of 500% a year.
And behind the microphone, you just see Bill Ackman go like, yeah. Like, he just kind of gives this little nod like, I mean, you got a good point.
He's like, what about 60% a year? Trying to nickel and dime
They're
him.
negotiating like
But so
70, 50, 60, done.
But so Valeant collapses with the price gouging and then the massive accounting fraud. 2 Valeant executives are charged criminally. As of October 2016, Bloomberg reported that the U.S. prosecutors were looking into charging the CEO, Michael Pearson,
I can
with
just see
fraud.
Like during those hearings, the senators being like, "You're making it real hard for us to drag our feet on health care."
But so the CEO, Michael Pearson, has not yet been charged with fraud, but maybe he will be, probably not. But basically, and it costs Bill Ackman $4 billion for his hedge fund investors. And since that time, he's been losing a lot of money. And it is just kind of funny because he acts like he's like a victim of this when it's like, you knew what the business model was going into it. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry you lost a bunch of money on your investment in the company that jacks up prices of life-saving drugs because they were also doing fraud.
But success is built on failure and also greed.
I just like the idea of him like crying in the schoolyard about like, yeah, they said they were just doing killing people by jacking up drug prices that they needed to live. I didn't know they were also doing massive accounting fraud. But yeah, so that's kind of brings you up to speed, and that Valeant collapse happened concurrent with the betting on zero case where he short sells Herbalife because, as we mentioned, Carl Icahn hates him. He buys up massive amounts of Herbalife, dries up the price. The FTC looks into Herbalife. They ultimately find them about $200 million, and they wag their finger at them and say they have to change some business practices, but ultimately not that much. So
basically what it looked like they did from the documentary to change their business practices is they stopped targeting Latino communities and just expanded.
Only Russian immigrants.
They expanded to Vietnam. Like, there's this great part where they're talking about going to Vietnam and they're like, people need jobs and people need food, and we kind of cover both of those on one thing. It's like, oh, America's finding new ways to destroy the people of Vietnam.
And it's like a clip from Mad Money, the Jim Cramer show, and Jim Cramer's just like, I'm not trying to be racist, but what do people in Vietnam need supplements for? And like, he's not wrong, but it's just the worst way to fucking say that.
The Herbalife Agent Orange flavor.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, like he loses about $1 billion on Herbalife. He loses $4 billion on Valeant, and
also
then he gets divorced. As we mentioned, he has to pay out a 7-figure divorce. So his net worth has more than fallen in half in the last few years. And as of April 5th, there's a New York Post story that about 2/3 of all.
Did you say 7-figure divorce?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Am I wrong?
I mean, for a billionaire, that's pocket change.
Yeah.
But so I've got the divorce dirt, as always.
So he gets divorced, at the end of last year?
He gets divorced at the end of 2016.
2 years, yeah. Okay.
And apparently...
there's a documentary on that
so
called
Vanity Fair says it's a
betting on
9-figure
50%.
divorce.
Betting on 50%.
Vanity Fair says it's a 9-figure divorce, which I'm not even sure.
Wow, that's a...
Damn.
How could she get... Anyway,
because he was worth
50-50.
he was like $2.5 billion, so maybe she got half of it because there was no prenuptial
There was
agreement.
no prenuptial agreement, yeah.
No, it's less than half.
You know what
probably
I'll say?
like some 100 million.
Never invest your money with a man who doesn't know to sign a prenup.
So he gets a divorce from her. They've been married for between 25 and 22 years. All the articles are fucked up. And they got 3 kids. Karen, what's her last name? Herkovitz? It was Ackman, but it's not anymore. It's Hershkovitz? Andy, can you read that?
All I know is that she actually had this quote after the divorce.
And I'm telling you, he's like the crybaby in the schoolyard. I went to a tough school in Queens, and they used to beat up the little Jewish boys, and he was like one of these little Jewish boys.
There's an optimal level of bullying that he never got from Ackman.
Yeah.
I feel.
So Karen is a landscape architect, and there's really zero information on her on the internet. And on one website, the Human Rights Watch website, they talk about how she currently volunteers.
She's partially responsible for a genocide.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They talk about how she volunteers to help fake chemical weapons attacks in Syria to start a war.
Karen currently volunteers and serves on the board of directors of the High Line, as we all know. Steven was telling me earlier about how fucked up the High Line is. I don't know much of this.
It's just hard for me to appreciate walking through the High Line, knowing what a huge giveaway it is to the developers for that area.
For non-New Yorkers, it was an elevated railroad track going through Manhattan, originally for freight trains, and a group basically turned it into a very narrow park on top of the railroad track. That's a cool idea until you go there and it's full of tourists and you can't walk anywhere.
Right, and it used to be substantially more affordable
to
live there, and now it's all like a lot of New York upscale condos.
Yeah, it's
private schools and shit.
Upscale condos where you can, go over to a park with an amphitheater that looks down upon traffic. That's a feature of the High Line is there's stadium seating, viewing traffic.
And so Bill Ackman is now dating this girl, Neri Oxman, and apparently they were fucking for a little bit. But however, now all the articles are about how Brad Pitt is having sex with this Neri Oxman lady. And yesterday, Extra said it's a rumor, but now today, fucking Yahoo says, oh yeah, they're fucking all right.
What?
Wait, Brad Pitt's cucking
Bill.
Oh man,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
But that is sad.
If you're Brad Pitt, by the way, that is totally your retirement plan.
Yeah, I think so.
But
I think the main thing I want to get across from these divorce and this relationship is Bill Ackman does not eat the butt. Doesn't eat the butt.
No.
I don't think so. He's a weak billionaire. He doesn't have that much money. Brad Pitt cucked the fuck out of him. And more importantly...
Carl Icahn cucked him, too.
That's right. That's right. And
Carl Icahn eats the butt.
He only eats butt.
He enters into agreement to eat butt and then reneges on it.
He's a generous person.
I'm going to destroy this ass like those Jewish boys at my school.
Wait, I didn't agree to that. You're supposed to destroy my ass. Come on, let's get to it.
This is schmuck insurance.
But it is sad when Extra and Yahoo are arguing, because who do you trust? But last thing on Valeant Pharmaceuticals, after this massive accounting fraud and these terrible price gouging practices, they're still in business. They're operating
sounding a little less Valiant.
As of today, April 2018, they're selling for about $17 a share, and the CEO has said they are going to do the most important thing possible for a company that has been in the midst of scandals to restore trust with consumers. Would you guys like to guess what that is?
Yes.
They're going to change the name.
Oh, rebranding, baby. That's what America does best.
Yeah. According to the New York Post, in May 2017, the CEO says they are very serious about looking at alternative names.
To the consumers who say they've lost trust in us, I say one more. One more turn of the screw.
That's my favorite.
Is Spectrum taken?
It's my favorite thing about America is our cable companies just change their name every 10 years, and our, mercenary killing companies just change their name every time like people open up on a crowded traffic intersection and kill 20 people.
The first time I'd seen that was
they changed their name from Valiant to Blackwater. It's like, well, they used anymore.
They have a better reputation than us. Just kind of a fun story if we're kind of bouncing around here. But Bill Ackman is actually, it's interesting, like all these people kind of know each other. So Bill Ackman is friends with a guy named Ezra Merkin who was a feeder for Bernie Madoff. Like he would steer client money into Bernie Madoff, Ezra Merkin would. And so in January 2009, Ackman defends his longtime friend Ezra Merkin, saying, quote, "Has Ezra committed a crime? I don't think so. I think Merkin is an honest person, an intelligent person, an interesting person, a smart investor." And again, just to put this in context, Ezra Merkin has been charged with civil fraud by the state of New York for quote, secretly steering $2.4 billion in client money into Bernie Madoff's Ponzi fund without their permission. Nice. So he got people to lose about $2.5 billion. He eventually had to pay out a $405 million settlement to victims, but he's still a millionaire because there's consequences for these people. And a random fun story that I found while researching this, Ezra Merkin lives at 740 Park Avenue, which has been called the most valuable apartment in the world. 740 Park Avenue, David Koch lives there. You need at least $100 million in liquid assets in order to be seen by the co-op board. But on April 2016, Ezra Merkin, somebody was using his sauna at the place to store... Yeah, he was using his sauna to store clothes and books. I'm quoting from the Daily Mail here. And I think a staff member turned on the sauna while the clothes and books were in there and started a massive fire in 740 Park Avenue. And the great thing is, like, it fucks over a bunch of other rich people. I think Steve Mnuchin had to, like, stay in a hotel or something.
Oh, man.
Damn,
so
and
sad.
props to that woke-ass agent of
By the way, this is the third Netflix documentary that is involved in this story, because there's also one
on 740
called Park Avenue that focuses on 720 Park, with the idea that like just 1 mile down on Park Avenue is one of the poorest neighborhoods
in the Bronx.
The Bronx, yeah.
But so
wait, really?
Yeah,
that's so fucked up.
Yeah, the Daily Mail article goes through like all the different billionaire and multimillionaire.
Watch those rich people have to live near those poor people. You know, it's so fucked up.
It goes through all the different units that had fire damage. Like they say, fashion designer Vera Wang was choked by smoke and fumes. But I love, although the David Koch's property, his and his wife's, escaped fire damage, they were, quote, hoses drenched the homes of the Kochs and real estate mover and shaker Andrew Stone. And then later, David Koch's wife, Julia Flesher, fell in the dark and gloomy lobby and broke multiple bones.
Owned.
I don't know if that was actually related to the fire, though.
The title of this article was 0% sympathy.
Round-winning kill.
But yeah, that's just a fun story.
Hey, this will bring you a smile.
Quote from Fire, wish we could have finished them.
But it's just kind of funny.
Turns out the Fire is now polling ahead in the mayoral race for New York, ahead of Bill de Blasio.
It is kind of funny. Like maybe this is what this guy was trying to do to redeem himself for like steering all this all this Jewish charity money into like Bernie Madoff.
Right.
He's like, yeah, I'm gonna drench David Koch in hose water.
I will say that. Who did you say turned on the sauna? Like an assistant?
It just said a member of his staff.
Okay,
Hero.
Yeah. In the Park Avenue documentary, they interview a bellhop or someone who worked for the Coke or a doorman who worked there.
Yeah.
They blurred out his face and everything.
Yeah,
and he was saying like, I thought that on Christmas, I'm working for these rich people. I'm going to get a lot of money. So, on Christmas, they had us move all this stuff into their limousines, for their big vacation.
Right.
And then David Koch gave me a $50 tip in the form of a check.
What?
And you just think like something happened to that staffer.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah.
It'd be
I
funny.
had to check and make sure the sauna was working, and then I went off to, polish your silver, and there was a fire.
The article says it was started by a staff member and DSA member. But so
it's more of an ML.
Yeah.
Marxist Leninist.
It's an anarchist.
We're at an hour 9.
Yeah. Okay. So
let me rephrase that. I've only got 4 minutes more of memory on this card.
All right,
and I have to go and
Steven's got to go too.
We got to clear this up. Okay, so just like a couple other random stories. Joe Biden wanted to punch Bill Ackman in the face because I guess they were at some dinner at, interestingly enough, Anthony Scaramucci hosts an annual conference for hedge funds.
The Mooch.
Yeah. And so in Vegas, they were at this dinner together, and then it was originally reported that that Biden was crying, talking about his dead son, and then he said, "I can't talk anymore," and Bill Ackman said, "Well, that never stopped you before."
Whoa! What?
And unfortunately, multiple witnesses have said that's not actually what happened, but I love the idea of that.
Man.
He was just like so bitter going through this divorce. He was like shitting on Biden. But apparently the actual story was that Biden says he was like talking about Trump, and he's like, I said, I shouldn't say anymore. And Ackman says, well, that's never stopped you before. And Biden apparently says, who's this wise ass? And he says, do you want to take this outside? And he later called him an asshole to his friends. Huh. So, just kind of a fun little anecdote from the page 6 of the New York Post. Ackman's also said that in November 2016, when Donald Trump was elected, he said, quote, I was extremely bullish on Trump, believe it or not.
By the way, Biden was so distraught by that interaction, he gave 5 women a shoulder squeeze that night.
So in November 2016, Ackman says, the U.S. is the greatest business in the world. It's been undermanaged for a very long period of time. We now have a businessman as president. And, maybe he's kissing up to Donald Trump, but clearly it doesn't work because his fund has underperformed the S&P 500 by 20% a year for the last 3 years.
Well, he was kissing up to Donald Trump while doing this, like, I'm here to protect the Latino community shtick.
Oh, yeah.
Of course he was.
We're building walls between one another that I'm tearing down to tear down Herbalife.
But yeah, so Bill Ackman, we will follow up on this guy because I think his hedge fund is going to go under, just like his previous one did. As we mentioned, April this month, the New York Post reported that about 2/3 of all eligible people are pulling their money out because he's been underperforming the market. And just another fun story about what a kind of wealth transfer scheme between bourgeoisie hedge funds are. This is just Wikipedia. But December 2012, Pershing Square Capital Management launches a closed-end end fund called Pershing Square Holdings. As a closed-end fund, it was designated as a permanent capital vehicle from which investors would not be able to directly withdraw funds. It gets about $3 billion, and it has reported 17.1% in return since inception, which is 80% below the S&P 500. So again, they take $3 billion of investor funds, they say, no, you can't withdraw it, and then they underperform the S&P 500 by 80%. And,
So I think we all agree, Bill Ackman,
hero.
Although he does something kind of good, we're literally in our last seconds, he's also a major piece of shit. Doesn't eat butt, obviously,
No.
and More importantly, just sucks as a person. All right.
In conclusion,
And I'm telling you, he's like the crybaby in the schoolyard. You know, I went to a tough school in Queens that they used to beat up the little Jewish boys, and he was like one of these little Jewish boys.
Before we go, I just want to say thank you to our listeners. We crossed 1,000 listens.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very fantastic of everyone. If you like our podcast, I don't know, tell a friend maybe. Other than that, you guys are amazing. We'll put out more content on the internet soon. We're at our last 20 seconds. With that, I believe I'm Yogi Pollywall.
I'm Eddie Palmer.
Stephen Jeffries.
I'm Sean McCarthy.
Good night.
Isopril was $21.83 for 10 5-milliliter vials. It's now $17,901. That's in about a year and a half time. Why would you not recommend to the board that, over a 30% increase for 1 year? I would think that's a pretty good return rate. Why don't you charge $3,000 for that?
Look, it's something we'll discuss tomorrow.
You will discuss dropping the price of Isopril to $3,000 because that's over a 30% increase in the original price.
So we will absolutely discuss it.
Okay. Nitropress went from $214 to $880 for one 2-milliliter vial. A 30% increase, again, a pretty good shot, would be about $300. Will you talk about that as well at the board?
For sure.